The Ringwraiths are Sauron's elite force, his most terrifying servants. But the reasons they were so trusted in the eyes of the Dark Lord go far beyond what the movies show. Some situations described in the books make them far more horrifying than anything we see on screen. So, in this video, we'll be looking at 5 things the movies never told you about the Nazgûl. 1. The Black Breath. The Nazgûl carried a terrifying aura known as the Black Breath, or the Black Shadow. This presence could cause panic not only in people, but also in animals. Horses, for example. Exposure to the Black Breath could lead to different reactions depending on the victim and how long they were exposed. These effects range from extreme fear to fainting, coma, and in some cases, even death. What makes this power especially disturbing is that no physical contact was required. The victim didn't need to inhale anything. They didn't need to be touched. Simply being close enough to a Nazgûl could already cause severe consequences. In the movies, we get brief hints of this, like Pippin's panic, the fear of Gondor's soldiers, or Éowyn collapsing and showing dark marks on her arm. But in my opinion, the book scene involving Merry describes the Black Breath far better. Here's the context. At the inn in Bree, before the hobbits meet Aragorn, Merry steps outside to get some air and look at the stars. He spots 2 Ringwraiths and tries to get closer to hear what they're saying, but he collapses simply from getting too close. Quoting the Fellowship of the Ring, Merry came in with a rush followed by Nob. "I have seen them, Frodo! I have seen them! Black Riders!" "Black Riders!" cried Frodo. "Where?" "Here, in the village." Suddenly I shivered and felt that something horrible was creeping near. There was a sort of deeper shade among the shadows across the road, just beyond the edge of the lamplight. Anyway, I went, and suddenly I heard voices by the hedge. One was muttering, and the other was whispering or hissing. I couldn't hear a word that was said. I did not creep any closer because I began to tremble all over. Then I felt terrified, and I turned back, and was just going to bolt home, when something came behind me and I fell over. "I found him, sir," put in Nob. "He seemed to be asleep." "I am afraid that's true," said Merry, "though I don't know what I said. I had an ugly dream, which I can't remember. I went to pieces. I don't know what came over me." "I do," said Strider. The Black Breath. 2. The Ringwraiths' connection to Sauron. The Nazgûl and Sauron were spiritually bound to one another. How powerful the Ringwraiths were at any given time depended directly on Sauron's own strength. A clear example of this happens after Sauron is defeated at the end of the War of the Last Alliance. With Sauron greatly weakened, the Nazgûl could no longer maintain their physical forms and vanished for over 1,000 years. They only reappeared around the year 1300 of the Third Age, when Sauron's power and physical form began to take shape again. During the War of the Ring, with Sauron much stronger, the Witch King felt confident enough to confront Gandalf the White at the gates of Minas Tirith. This scene is very different in the books compared to the films. Gandalf does not have his staff broken. He is not thrown from his horse. Instead, the moment feels like a tense standoff, which is interrupted by the arrival of the Rohirrim, forcing the Nazgûl to withdraw. 3. Immortal to ordinary means. That same spiritual connection between Sauron and the Nazgûl did more than extend their unnatural longevity. It also prevented them from being killed by ordinary weapons. The movies don't make this very clear, but the Witch King is only defeated because Merry wounds him with a barrow blade. This is one of the very few weapons in Middle-earth capable of temporarily breaking the bond between the Witch King and Sauron. Éowyn takes advantage of that brief opening and strikes the fatal blow. As Tolkien writes in The Return of the King, then he looked for his sword that he had let fall, for even as he struck his blow, his arm was numbed, and now he could only use his left hand. And behold, there lay his weapon, but the blade was smoking like a dry branch that has been thrust in a fire. And as he watched it, it writhed and withered and was consumed. So passed the sword of the Barrow Downs, work of Westerness. No other blade, not though mightier hands had wielded it, would have dealt that foe a wound so bitter, cleaving the undead flesh, breaking the spell that knit his unseen sinews to his will. 4. Nearly blind in daylight. Another disturbing detail from the books is how heavily the Nazgûl rely on their sense of smell. Because they cannot see the world of light properly, they often move in unsettling ways. They lean close to the ground, sniffing and searching, tracking their prey like predators. There is a scene when the hobbits are still in the Shire and the riders are hunting for them. That is absolutely disturbing. Quoting the Fellowship of the Ring, "Don't let us go too far," said Frodo. "I don't want to be seen, but I want to see if it is another Black Rider." "Very well," said Pippin, "but don't forget the sniffing." The hoofs drew nearer. They had no time to find any hiding place better than the general darkness under the trees. Sam and Pippin crouched behind a large tree bole, while Frodo crept back a few yards towards the lane. The sound of hooves stopped. As Frodo watched, he saw something dark pass across the lighter space between two trees, and then halt. It looked like the black shade of a horse led by a smaller black shadow. The black shadow stood close to the point where they had left the path, and it swayed from side to side. Frodo thought he heard the sound of snuffling. The shadow bent to the ground, and then began to crawl towards him. I don't know about you, but that's incredibly creepy for me. Anyways, later Aragorn explains why they behave this way. They themselves do not see the world of light as we do, but our shapes cast shadows in their minds, which only the noon sun destroys. And in the dark, they perceive many signs and forms that are hidden from us. Then, they are most to be feared. And at all times they smell the blood of living things, desiring and hating it. 5. The Morgul Blade. The movies do an excellent job showing the horrific effects of the Witch King's blade on Frodo. Aragorn even briefly mentions that Frodo is beginning to turn into a wraith.
He's passing into the Shadow World. He'll soon become a wraith like them.
But in the book, Tolkien explains this weapon in much greater detail. A Morgul blade is a special weapon used by the Nazgûl. When it strikes, it leaves a fragment inside the victim's body. That shard slowly works its way deeper, while the victim gradually fades and begins to turn into a wraith, like the Ringwraiths, though weaker and under their control. When Gandalf and Frodo reunite in Rivendell, Gandalf explains exactly what would have happened. "What would they have done to me?" asked Frodo. "What were the riders trying to do?" "They tried to pierce your heart with a Morgul-knife, which remains in the wound," answered Gandalf. "If they had succeeded, you would have become like they are, only weaker and under their command. You would have become a wraith under the dominion of the Dark Lord. Your heart was not touched, and only your shoulder was pierced. Elrond is a master of healing, but the weapons of our enemy are deadly. To tell you the truth, I had very little hope, for I suspected that there was some fragment of the blade still in the closed wound, but it could not be found until last night. Then Elrond removed a splinter. It was deeply buried, and it was working inwards. Perhaps the Morgul blade is the most terrible weapon anyone could ever be wounded by in Middle-earth. Because even after the fall of the Witch King, and even after the defeat of the Dark Lord himself, Frodo is never truly cured. What he carries is not just a scar, but a doom that never truly leaves him. And the only relief he can find comes from leaving his home and his friends behind in Middle-earth, and sailing away to live under the care of the Valar. I considered including other topics here, like the wound Frodo dealt to the Witch King in the books, why the Nazgûl withdrew on Weathertop, or how the hobbits obtained their enchanted daggers. But since I prefer shorter videos, I'll leave that for a second part. If you like this kind of video, consider subscribing and leaving a like for more. It really helps small channels like this. Take care and see you in the next one.